to bring Nick into the conversation. So
hey,
Nick,
Emma, how are you?
pull up your presentation whenever you're ready.
All right.
And while you do that, I'm just going to introduce you.
Great.
So Nick Hoefly is going to be talking about the power of citizen science in bee research tonight. And, oh, hold on one second. Okay, awesome. So Nick is actually an urban beekeeper. So we're taking a step away from the type of apiary that Robin has to now go into Astoria, Queens in New York City. And so Nick keeps his hives on rooftops, in backyards, and also in cemeteries, which it turns out is a pretty good green space to have colonies. So Nick started beekeeping in 2016 just as a hobby with a friend. And when he was trying to, sell some honey to finance the hobby, he started a business called Astor Apiaries with his wife, Ashley. And the business grew from there, and now they're managing between 35 and 40 hives in and around New York City. They also provide education and beekeeping services and sell both their own honey as well as regional honey varietals to their customers. And Nick is also the head beekeeper for the historic Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. So I'm really interested to hear Nick's presentation tonight because I saw some of his posts on Facebook and within kind of our students at the Master Beekeeping class, trying to get them recruited in thinking about citizen science for bee research. So whenever you're ready, Nick, you have the mic.
All right, thank you very much, Emma. So my presentation this evening is going to be on the power of citizen science in bee research. When I'm inspecting my hives, it's always a treat to find workers performing a waggle dance. For anyone who wasn't here for the previous presentation, I'll just mention real quick, a waggle dance is just a type of bee communication that conveys the location information of a certain outside resource, whether it's food or pollen or water, etc. This is a vital bit of data collection that must happen for a hive to remain healthy and operational. And each little citizen of the hive has a hand in the health of the colony by contributing their observations. As humans, we have also found a way to add to our collective understanding of the world around us. And we do that through citizen science. This is a broad term, and there are many, many applications of it. But it's most simply defined as the participation of members of the public in scientific research. It's put very well and explained kind of the breadth and vastness of it in a paper called The Rhetoric of Beekeeping, Science, Technology, and Innovation. They describe it as including taking pictures of local birds, public health advocacy work, donating swabbed cheek cells for DNA analysis, or spending hours combing through star images to categorize galaxies. The paper also describes two different approaches which I had not really thought about before, but one as a democratic citizen science and one as a contributory citizen science. The former champions the move of science and knowledge out of the lab and into a more public forum. So it's kind of an activist science approach. The latter presents a more complementary partnership between data and analysis performed and contributed from the public, and then to be used by professional scientists in an official lab setting. Both approaches have their merits and have the right times to be used. So you see them across many different projects and platforms, and you may recognize a few of the different forms in some of the examples I have tonight. In many ways, we can kind of look at our collective knowledge about the world around us as three separate things. We have people, technology, and nature. As far as people go, our lives are made more and more convenient every day, and perhaps a little bit more isolated, as we can now have things brought right to our house. Living in an urban center like New York City, this is very, very apparent to me. And it's almost becoming more of a requirement as part of living in a place where it's difficult to move around. Many of the local neighborhood shops are closing down in favor of maybe more convenient, bigger box stores, etc. It's kind of a bleak outlook if you just look at it from that point, but there's also this incredible urge from city dwellers to hold on to some sort of any little piece of nature that they can. So whether it's tenderly raising a potted plant on a windowsill in their apartment, to religiously tending to a front yard or a community garden plot, people have this need to connect with nature. Today, it's never been easier to connect with others through technology. Video chat is standard on most, if not all, new cellular phones. Most media that we consume now comes through the internet, whether we're browsing the websites or listening to music and watching movies through a streaming service. Every day, the points of friction that have made it difficult to communicate in the past are disappearing. New tools and platforms are available that have given their users more power than ever to be a part of them. And then finally, as our culture has changed and technology advanced, it's becoming more important to realize that our environment is going through unprecedented changes itself. Some of these changes are evident, such as wildfires tearing through the hills of California, a tourist capturing the collapse of an ice wall in the Arctic, or even a beekeeper coming to find a significant portion of his bees just gone. However, much of what's going on with our environment is hidden across years or possibly even decades. So it's important that this information be read through consistent observation. And so that's kind of where citizen science comes in. It has the ability to bring together the people, technology, and the natural world all connected in one piece. This evening, I'd like to share with you some examples of this powerful tool and how it specifically relates to bee research. I'm going to cover some different ways projects collect data, the type and quality of data, and the cost benefits associated with opening data collection and analysis to the public. I'll also share some indirect benefits that come out of participation of these projects. One of the simplest forms of data collection is through survey. In this first example, the honeybee success predicted by landscape composition in Ohio. This project relied heavily on survey responses from beekeepers back in 2012 and 2013 as the main data set, along with hive location and location composition. The project was able to come to some conclusions that contradicted conventional wisdom when it comes to the quality of colony success in urban versus rural cropland environments. However, it was able to back up previous studies that found honeybees were more resilient to habitat loss than their native counterparts. So while a simple survey can certainly provide the basis of a project, some projects go a little bit further. The project assessing the role of environmental conditions on efficacy rates of nematodes for controlling small hive beetles in honeybee colonies relied on beekeepers in the mid-Atlantic region. However, instead of just asking for survey responses, they actually sent materials and equipment to each beekeeper involved to actually execute different tests. They worked with nearly 1,200 hives that were entered into the experiment. About 639 of them ended up completing some part of the experiment, and only 71 of the hives fully satisfied all of the requirements of the study. In my reading of this and many studies, it's very clear that one of the major drawbacks of public participation is the lack of follow-through from some of the participants. It's something that you just can't get around. However, this issue can kind of be diluted with the potential to have these enormous pools of participants in data. So a lot of research out there, including the study, was still able to find significant results and draw reasonable conclusions, even though a large number of their samples did not pan out. And again, this study was not definitive, but they were able to identify certain environmental variables that did or did not predict the population of small hive beetles in hives when nematodes were used as a biological control. So the results to this are not final, but they are an excellent stepping stone for future studies. For different means of data collection, instead of survey data, this Austrian project actually collected samples. So well, Emma, I believe the slide has, no, that's the correct slide. Sorry about that.
Okay.
We just have a wrong title there. So this Austrian project, which is actually called a citizen science supported study on seasonal diversity and monoflorality in pollen collected by honeybees in Austria, collected pollen samples from citizen scientists, beekeepers over 2 years. The samples were collected from at least 36 different apiaries across Austria and were able to help identify more than 200 different floral sources that the bees were attracted to. This type of study would be completely unreasonable to try to do as far as the logistics and cost associated with it, to use just a single team. So they were able to work with all of these places across Austria to come up with all of this data. So it's a real, it's an overwhelming benefit for scientists and researchers to include beekeepers in their research. In the last decade, many platforms have been developed to facilitate public participation in scientific research. Some include citizenscience.gov, Zooniverse, the Citizen Science Association, and many others. Just Google it, you'll find a whole list. But one of the more popular platforms closer to our industry is iNaturalist. This is a website that is also an app. This app allows people to take pictures with their phones, to submit findings of any biological specimens that they have around them. People and organizations can also start projects on the platform that are focused on a particular subject. In this particular paper, which is called More Eyes on the Prize, an observation of very rare threatened species of Philippine bumblebee on iNaturalist and the importance of citizen science and conservation biology. This tool may be the only reason that this lost species of bumblebee was rediscovered for the first time since the 90s. The chances of these observations of rare species are much greater by people who actually live in the environment rather than by scientists who may occasionally visit, if they visit at all. It's also worth noting that the democratization of technology and internet access has really opened up citizen science to many who may not have had it before. So it's a really great thing to get people connected and online. In the US, we have many organizations that use platforms like iNaturalist. And one here in New York City is the Honey Bee Conservancy. They run an event called Bee Blitz, which encourages members of the public to seek out and document bee species in a particular location. Last year in 2019, along with the Island Bee Project on Governor's Island, the Conservancy challenged people to visit Governor's Island and help document all of the bee species found there. Not only did they produce data on the bees, which was the main goal, but they were also able to positively engage with the public and share about the plight of pollinators in urban environments, which is so valuable. Events like these give people a sense of ownership of their local ecosystems and hopefully inspire better decision-making and new interests with regard to nature. And of course, across the country, we have institutions being welcomed into real-world environments. And one that we have right here close to home is the New York State Beekeeper Tech Team, which is facilitated by Cornell's very own Dice Lab. This program visits and works with beekeepers across the state each year to collect and analyze data on beehives and give a better sense of what's happening with New York bees. Not to mention the education that they provide to beekeepers along the way to help build profitable businesses and healthier bees. And I'm certainly looking forward to participating with the tech team sometime in the near future. On a more national scale, the tech team is not alone. There's a very well-known organization called the Bee Informed Partnership. And they have a program called Sentinel Apiaries. This program is the self-proclaimed largest honeybee disease monitoring program in the world. And they also work with beekeepers across the country, I believe in 33 states, to monitor for the transmission of varroa mites and for nosema through monthly testing. Of course, that's not the only program that the Bee Informed Partnership has. They also administer the annual Loss and Management Survey, which is the largest survey of its kind in the States. And this year they've received responses from nearly 3,400 beekeepers, keeping over 276,000 hives, which is approximately 10% of the nation's hives. So quite a big sample size. The survey is extensive and provides a mountain of data to analyze, and it's used by many other institutions, researchers, grad students, and others. And this is something that you'll find out if you attend any type of lecture at any type of beekeeper conference anytime soon. So this provides an important lens on what's happening and where it's happening with the bees. Another project of theirs is called Mite Check. This is an app that allows beekeepers to share their mite count data with the public. Another organization called the Pollinator Partnership holds an annual event called the Mite-a-thon, which encourages North American beekeepers to count their mites and to submit their counts over a 2-week period. They use Mite Check as the collection vehicle for all this data. And just as I mentioned earlier with Bee Blitz, this event collects data, but it also serves as an opportunity to try to get new beekeepers in who may have never done a mite count before, to do one, contribute it, and hopefully inspiring regular mite checks. And finally, if none of those programs are right for you, the Bee Informed Partnership is happy to collect data from hive monitors. Weight and temperature and humidity are generally the sensors that we put on hives, and it's a great passive way to contribute as a beekeeper. And this is actually something that I've done myself this year. I set up a hive with sensors and primarily to track the nectar flow in my area. Real quick, I'll talk about, this is a project that I'm starting kind of as a side project. It's a dynamic beekeeper's calendar, and the goal is to use sensor data, temperature records, bloom data, and beekeeping survey responses to create a predictive calendar model to kind of tell beekeepers when to do certain tasks or to look for certain conditions. This is a project that is kind of ongoing in the background for me, but you can find more information at nycbeekeeper.com if you want to follow along or participate if you're local to the area. And real quick, my conclusion here, citizen science is a very, very broad tool with many applications. It allows for more data collection in less time. It provides real-world data with a real-world variation that's not always possible in a lab. And the data is essentially free, or if not free, it's very affordable for organizations on a budget. And finally, the indirect benefits, opportunities for public engagement. You can build scientific literacy among the public more readily, and you can really inspire people to make those better decisions or to find new interests in the research topic. So this is kind of how citizen science can bring together people, technology, nature, all into one piece. So thank you all for listening, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. That was so cool. That was such a nice overview of all the ways that even our listeners today, if they're keeping honeybees or if they're interested in pollinators, can actually participate in citizen science. And I'm so excited that you are doing your own citizen science approach to put together like a very reflective calendar for your area in New York City. And I can't wait to hear a little bit more about how that goes over time. The first question that I have for you is actually related to that. So you've done a lot of research, both reading scientific articles and kind of seeing what citizen science projects are available today. And you've seen that there are some kind of pros and cons that go along with that. One good example is the very first one, where you showed the results to say something like 1,100 people enrolled, but only 71 hives actually fulfilled all of the requirements to have useful data. So given some of the information you learned from your research, what are some things that you can apply to try to really get folks to participate in your citizen science calendar project?
One of the big things that's illustrated by that particular project is the fact that you really need a wide net when you're looking for participants. These projects are not possible to do if your sample size, or if you're only reaching out to a small group. So I'm certainly reaching out to all the beekeepers I know personally, all the people involved with organizations here locally that I know, until I go a little bit further out beyond New York City. Hopefully in the near future, I'll start reaching out to certainly the Long Island Beekeepers Club and the clubs in Jersey and so on, to try to widen that pool. But that's the biggest thing, is really getting enough people in so that you can afford to lose some and still have significant data, which is what that study found. Even though they had only 71 hives that followed through with everything, those hives plus the 640 or so hives that completed some of the data, they were able to find statistically significant results.
Very cool. And are you hoping to kind of hone in on very specific aspects of the calendar? So just a few things that people can report on, like the start of a nectar flow, for instance?
Right. So I have a survey up right now, and those are a few of the questions that I ask. So all of the questions I'm asking in this survey are based on the Beekeepers 2019 season. So I ask a lot of questions like, when did you first inspect your hive after the winter? Did you feed your hive in the late winter, and when did that happen? When does swarm season start? When does swarm season end? When does the dearth start? When does the dearth end? When does the nectar flow start? When does the nectar flow end? So all of these dates, the idea is to start bringing them all together and finding the average of everybody's experience, to find these target dates where we know that, you know what, the last week of May is when the nectar flow starts in New York City. So you need to be ready then, instead of, even a week later, because you can really miss out on a significant amount of honey in just that 1 week.
Very cool. So Robin has a question for you. He said, great talk. I'm curious if you came across any concerns of data collection by non-scientists. Are there ways to ensure quality data without bias?
So there's always a risk of having someone troll your study. So certainly someone can come in and submit bogus information or made up information. The kind of safety net, or the protection against that, again, is the size of your sample. So the larger, or the more participants that you can get in who are being faithful and participating like they should, they're going to dilute and really push out the bad information. For some instances, it may be a situation where some of the results are so far beyond what's expected or what everything else is showing that you may need to eliminate some of the data that you've received and just call it bad data. So it's certainly a risk, and again, it's more of a risk if you're only working with a handful of participants as opposed to thousands of participants.
Sure. And I think too, if there's some sort of a citizens science project that involves images, like you gave some examples about how some are simply taking photos and having folks identify what is in that photo. Maybe it could be a case where several different people have to look at the same photo, and most of them have to be able to say that it's the same thing.
Exactly. Sure. So in that case,
systems in place.
You have kind of a consensus over the mini, and the one person who comes in and says it's the opposite thing, their response kind of gets washed out with all the rest of the good faith responses.
Yeah, but you're right. It can be messy data, and the whole idea is the power of numbers. Having a lot of folks contribute might help overcome some of that messiness. So we have a question from Megan on Facebook. She says, what are the strategies when you might believe self-reporting data is inaccurate? In your presentation, the Bee Informed Partnership reported 3,400 participants in 276,000 hives. The average participant would have 81 colonies. Seems that might be high, question mark. It's probably similar to the question you were just asked, actually, but take it away.
Sure. So this survey is taking in consideration beekeepers of all sizes. So there might be a lot of beekeepers who only have 4 or 5 hives in this survey, but there's also a handful of beekeepers that have 5,000 hives in this survey. So there's really a range of different apiary sizes that are represented by those 3,400 beekeepers. So and 81 hives really is not that big when you are looking at kind of the scale of beekeepers of apiaries in the industry. You know, that might be kind of a small sideliner business, whereas someone with 300 hives or upwards of 500 hives might be kind of tipping the scale towards a more commercial operation. So it's definitely a high average if you're considering everybody more of a hobbyist, but it's certainly within a reasonable number regarding beekeepers as a whole.
Great. And my last question for you, Nick, is after going through this Master Beekeeping program, you're going to be a Master Beekeeper. And you've talked a lot about some of the benefits that we can see from these programs, these citizen science programs. And if we're able to collect a lot of data, whether it's on mite populations at a given time of year or a beekeeping calendar for New York City, this information can really benefit a lot of other beekeepers. So as a Master Beekeeper yourself and thinking about others in the class, what can we do to try to encourage folks to take advantage of these programs and participate in them?
I think it's all about word of mouth. Beekeeping is not an individual practice. Your bees don't just stick to their own hive. They go out and they mingle with all the other hives in your vicinity. So it's only right that beekeepers get out and mingle with all the other beekeepers out there. So I think it's important to always be open and willing to talk to people. Certainly as a master beekeeper, that is my goal, to leave people not only more informed, but hopefully, you know, with a positive outlook on bees and not just scary stinging insect. So, yeah. And that's something we get here a lot in the city. I go out on swarm calls and wasp calls and all kinds of things here because there's a lot of people who, being in this urban center, it's easy to be disconnected from nature. And somebody sees something that looks like it might have a stinger, and they're freaked out by it. So it's important that we get out there and we explain to the general public like what a bee actually is, you know. And certainly for others, again, I think it's important to be involved in local beekeeping groups. I think it's important to share about what you're doing with your friends and family. Easy as that, you know. You can bring them a jar of honey and tell them exactly how your bees made that honey. So.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you both, Nick and Robin. Those were both excellent presentations. I'm going to be uploading your grades probably within the next 15 minutes or so, so keep an eye out there. And thanks to everyone else who tuned in tonight. We will have another presentation on Monday. So thank you guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much.